Today, we live in an era where military technology is highly advanced. By comparison, ancient warfare might seem more primitive, but that doesn't mean they only used stones and sticks. So what kind of weapons did these clever ancient people use to conquer cities or defend their countries? Number 10. The fire lance. If you had to guess, when do you think firearms were invented? Although this weapon looks quite modern, records of gunpowder actually date back to the Tang dynasty. Shortly after Sun Simiao invented gunpowder, it was used on the battlefield. In 1132, during the Songjing battle, Chen Gui first used long bamboo fire lances made with gunpowder against the enemy. This was the world's earliest tubular fire lance. Its barrel was made from a long bamboo tube, and two soldiers operated one together. One held the weapon while the other ignited the gunpowder inside, blasting flames to scorch the enemy. In 1232, during the Mongol siege of Bianjing, the Jin general improved the bamboo fire lance used by the Song army and invented the flying fire lance. Compared to the main fire lance, the flying fire lance was a step ahead. Its gunpowder burned instantly inside the barrel, shooting flames over 10 zhang about 33 feet to kill the enemy. But these were still just the earliest tubular fire lances. The official birth of tubular firearms came in 1259. The hand cannon used a giant metal barrel as the gun tube, with gunpowder and bullets loaded inside. However, in actual combat, firearms made from bamboo or straight tubes would easily get scorched or burned after a few shots, sometimes even exploding. So someone invented metal barrels to replace the bamboo and straight tubes. Later, during battles between the Arabs and the Yuan dynasty army, Arabs copied and improved upon the Yuan's firearms, creating the Arab-style matchlock firearm. Afterward, the matchlock spread to Europe, where it was further improved and copied. By the mid-14th century, some European countries had also produced European-style matchlock handheld guns. Number 9. The Chongtong rocket launcher. In the early 16th century, Korea made a major breakthrough in weapons research by inventing a multi-barrel rocket launcher called the Chongtong. One ignition could launch 100 rockets, and some could fire nearly 200 rockets with a single shot. These rocket launching carts became the nightmare of Japanese samurai because a single volley of rockets was enough to defeat an entire tightly packed squad of samurai. The rockets equipped on the cocking carts were called divine machine arrows. Simply put, they were ordinary arrows set on fire. The fuse of the divine machine arrows could be adjusted based on the enemy's range, so they would explode the moment they touched the enemy. By the time Japan launched a full-scale invasion of Korea in 1592, the Koreans already had over 100 usable cocking carts. Perhaps the Battle of Shinju in 1593 was the best proof of the cocking cart's power. When the 30,000-strong Japanese army attacked the mountain fortress, the defenders in Shinju soldiers, commoners, and warrior monks combined numbered only about 3,000. The outcome seemed obvious. The Japanese forces were very confident, but they didn't realize Shinju had a trump card. 40 cocking carts positioned on the outer walls repelled 59 Japanese attacks time and again with waves of intense hellfire. Before the Japanese forces could advance, over 10,000 of their soldiers had already been killed or wounded. This battle was Korea's first major victory during Japan's invasion. Number 8. The War Wolf Trebuchet. The trebuchet is a long-range weapon that uses a swinging lever to hurl heavy objects at targets. Armies usually used it to break down walls, and sometimes to throw Greek fire, causing massive chaos and casualties. The trebuchet works simply: the counterweight is lifted, raising the throwing arm. When it fires, the counterweight drops quickly, converting gravitational potential energy into kinetic energy. The projectile swings and releases at a specific point along its trajectory. Historically, during a campaign against Scotland, England's King Edward IV ordered his engineers to build a giant trebuchet before besieging Stirling Castle that was the largest trebuchet ever built, the Warwolf. It's rumored to have thrown stones weighing about 150 kilograms from more than 200 meters away. The counterweight of such a large trebuchet was typically 10 times the weight of the projectile, meaning the Warwolf's counterweight was about 1.5 tons. Once the Warwolf attacked, enemy soldiers had little chance of survival. Facing a formidable enemy, the Scottish defenders inside the castle had to surrender. But Edward I, eager to test the new trebuchet, refused to accept surrender and forced the Scots to stay inside while he resumed the siege. The Warwolf fully proved its worth. The rest is history's judgment. Number 7. Archimedes' Claw. The invention of Archimedes' Claw dates back to 214 BC. At that time, the Roman Republic was attacking Syracuse. Their fleet could have easily crushed the city, but fortunately, there was a genius inside. That genius was the well-known Archimedes. "Give me a place to stand, and I will move the earth." This famous quote came from him. Though he didn't literally move the earth, he used a lever to turn the tide of a war. He improved the simple lever principle and incorporated the height of the city walls by lifting ships with a lever like a fishing hook, and then suddenly releasing them. This drop could completely overturn a ship weighing about 60 tons. The Romans, terrified, called this massive claw Archimedes' claw. This powerful weapon helped Syracuse resist foreign attacks for a whole year. Unfortunately, due to the imbalance of forces, Archimedes was ultimately killed in this battle. At the time, Roman soldiers called Archimedes a mythical giant with bare hands. The Roman general Marcellus ruefully said it was a war between the Roman fleet and Archimedes alone. Number 6. The Hellburner. Hundreds of years ago, an Italian weapons expert named John Belli created a bomb equivalent to a strategic nuclear weapon. In 1584, Dutch rebels launched a brutal 80-year-long war. Royal soldiers linked their ships together to build a 243-meter-long wooden bridge, blocking the Scheldt River. To break through, the defending commander Gianbelli had to destroy the Spanish wooden ship barrier. By combining two new technologies of the time clockwork mechanisms and gunpowder, a ship was successfully converted into what became the terrifying Hellburner bomb that struck fear into the Spanish. Since ancient times, the deadliest weapon against a mothership was the fireship. These ships required few crew, and once lit, they drifted with the wind and current, capable of burning entire fleets and docks. But the Hellburner was far more terrifying. Gianbelli built two ships with huge cargo holds filled with 2.5 tons of gunpowder, covered by layers of old tombstones to disguise them as ordinary fireships. On the night of April 4, 1584, the rebels released 30 fireships into the Scheldt River. The Spanish soldiers were still calm, pushing the fireships away with long spears as they approached the wooden barrier. Then, when the timer reached the set moment, it triggered the detonator. A massive explosion shook the earth and sky, instantly destroying a quarter of the wooden barrier and blasting over 1,000 Spanish soldiers into the air. Wood fragments, stones, and mangled limbs rained down, covering miles of the river surface. The blast also caused huge waves, flooding the banks, while the deafening roar woke citizens sleeping over 50 miles away. This explosion was likely the loudest in European history at that time. Number 5. The Aztec Obsidian Great Sword. The Aztec Obsidian Great Sword was known as the most famous weapon of the Aztecs. In the 16th century, when Europeans arrived in North America, they found indigenous peoples using various weapons, including defensive tools, shields, helmets, bows, darts, and heavy clubs. But the most terrifying of all was the Aztec Obsidian Great Sword. The Aztec Obsidian Great Sword wasn't a true sword. It was a wooden club about 1 meter long and 10 centimeters wide, with sharp obsidian blades protruding from its edges, each about 2.5 to 5 centimeters long, arranged along the club's length. In the Aztec Empire, which basically didn't use metal tools, the obsidian giant sword was Jaguar V's powerful weapon. The earliest obsidian giant swords could be wielded with one hand, but later versions required 2 hands to control, like a large saber. Although it looks a bit strange, like a wooden paddle, its power is incredible. Just one light strike could chop down a dock. Wherever the obsidian giant sword strikes, it undoubtedly causes very severe wounds. Because obsidian is hard and sharp, many tribes used it not only for giant swords, but also as arrowheads or spear tips. The 4th deadly whistle. The Aztecs had a special obsession with pain, and their terrifying weapons didn't stop at the obsidian giant sword. In 1999, Mexican archaeologists discovered the remains of a man over 500 years old in an Aztec temple, holding 2 skull-shaped whistles that looked like musical instruments. A brave expert tried blowing one, and almost died of fright on the spot. That terrifying sound was described as the screams of 1,000 drowning people. It's chilling just to hear about it. Later, it was named the Aztec death whistle. Experts studied the whistle's structure and found that when blown, several different airflows collide inside, producing that piercing sound. Some experts believe this whistle was a ritual item used to help the dead rest in peace. Others speculate it was used by the Aztecs in war to frighten their enemies. Imagine thousands of warriors blowing death whistles all at once. That intense sound could probably make enemy troops explode on the spot. The third way the lantern shield was created was through fusion, combining different functions into one new thing. The lantern shield is an example of this. Its designer wanted to make a shield that not only defended, but also had offensive capabilities, like a Swiss Army knife with many functions. So, the lantern shield is also called the Swiss Army knife weapon. The lantern shield is about 40 centimeters tall and weighs over 10 pounds. Attached to the shield is an iron protective glove with 2 serrated spikes on it. The jagged design is meant to better grab onto the opponent. The current design of the shield combined with iron gloves instantly doubles the defense capability. On the offensive side, there's a long spiked nail extending forward in the center of the shield's front, which can stab the opponent when the arm swings sideways. The back of the shield also has a common sword blade aligned parallel to the arm, which can be thrust out when the arm extends forward. But the most peculiar feature of the lantern shield is the small oil lamp placed on its back, which is exactly where the name lantern shield comes from. There's a round hole with a cover on the shield. When the cover opens, the light shines through. To adjust the brightness, you just change how much the iron cover blocks the hole. The lantern shield was specially designed for night battles. Suddenly, lighting up the shield in pitch darkness blinds the opponent's eyes. Then, taking advantage of their distraction or momentary blindness, you launch an attack to seize the initiative. Second is the man-catcher claw. After the Italians started using their lantern shields to dazzle each other, another amazing weapon appeared in Europe. This was innovatively named the man-catcher, also known as the man-catcher claw. On the battlefield, if the enemy is on horseback and you're on foot, it's hard to win because of the height difference. So someone invented this. The front end of the man-catcher is circular, lined with sharp spikes inside, designed to lock onto a rider's neck and pull the enemy off the horse. It was widely used in the early 16th century. Another use was to capture nobles or important enemies alive, and it could also catch criminals, serving as an upgraded version of handcuffs, to be more flexible and prevent the neck from easily escaping. The handle also had a spring mechanism. Most people might think this strange device is now just a thing of history, but I'm telling you, the man-catcher is still popular today. For example, the Japanese police currently use an improved version, though thankfully they've replaced the metal spikes with padded material. The number one is the Black Death Corps. In 1347 AD, the Mongol cavalry, which usually swept through the world, was stuck at Kaffa for 3 years and couldn't conquer the city. At the same time, a contagious disease silently spread within their army, making things even worse for the Mongols. But the Mongol leader, Johnny Beg, refused to give up the siege and came up with a brutal tactic. The next day, the Mongols attacked as usual, and with catapults joining the fight. The defenders were confused because the catapults weren't throwing giant stones, but dead bodies. Soon after, people inside the city became infected with the diseases those bodies had carried. Most residents started having fevers and fatigue, some even nausea and vomiting, body aches, and eventually all died from heart failure. And so, after holding out for 3 years, Kaffa finally fell. They never knew until their last breath that the disease they suffered from was one of the deadliest plagues in human history, the Black Death, also called the Plague. It got its name because the victims' bodies turned black after death. It's said that a small number of defenders in Kaffa survived the plague. To avoid being slaughtered by the Mongols, they fled back to Europe. The problem was, they also brought the plague bacteria back with them to Europe. At that time, Europe had massive population movement, poor technology, and extremely bad urban sanitation, all of which gave the plague perfect conditions to spread. The plague swept across Europe like autumn winds scattering fallen leaves, taking lives one after another. Everyone in Europe lived in terror. After saying goodbye to relatives and friends, no one knew if they would see each other again the next day. Some people would suddenly collapse on the street and never get up again. For them, death was as common as eating a meal. Between 1348 and 1350 alone, nearly 30 million people died from the plague in Europe, and at that time, the entire population of Europe was less than 100 million. No one expected that this biological weapon unknowingly used by the Mongols almost wiped out the entire European population. Alright, that's all for this video. Which of the 10 terrifying ancient weapons I shared today impressed you the most? Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments below. If you like this video, don't forget to like, subscribe and share to support me to create more interesting content. Thank you for your support.